The ruler that you carry around. A Subway sandwich, I love that. That is a foot long. It might even be a little bit longer than a foot. One thing that kind of doesn't come up as often for measuring a foot is literally your foot. Your foot is generally probably about a foot long. I think my feet are like size 11 or 12, and they're almost exactly a foot long, which is pretty cool. So I'm gonna put Subway / my foot. There we go. Those are good. It's actually smaller, the Subway foot long. That's devastating. All these years, I thought I've been getting a full foot long of food. 11 inches. Oh man, that's like false advertising. All right, a yard. A yard and a mile. These ones are a little bit maybe harder to kind of represent. The one that we usually come up with a yard would maybe be like your arm span would be a good reference for a yard. It's probably a bit bigger. I actually have a meter stick here, which is pretty close to a yard. I'll go into frame here. So you can see arm length. Maybe the length from like the middle out to one side would be a good yard. I don't know. So think of an arm length. If you're really short, maybe your arm length smaller, that's 1 yard. If you're really tall, then maybe like half an arm length. But I'll put in arm length. And then the last one for a mile. The distance from home to my work would be for a mile. That's good. That's a reference that works for you, which is awesome. But I don't know where you work or where your house is, so that wouldn't work very well for me. So I like the idea of like a distance though, like walking. Yeah, Devin, you're right. 0.9 yards to a meter. So a meter is just a little bit bigger. But mile, generally speaking, you could probably, if you're just going for a walk, like a nice walk with your friends, you could probably walk a mile in about 20 minutes or so. So I'm gonna go distance walked in 20 minutes. And I mean, that reference works for me. If it's something that, you know, doesn't make sense to you, then if you can think of something better, that's good. And a mile is just a little bit longer than a kilometer. So if you have sort of an idea of what a kilometer looks like, a mile is going to be a bit longer than that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. So those are all really good reference. And we'll definitely use those again in the future. The next little section here, oh, I didn't even mention on the side here of this table, it tells us the relationships between the units. Now, Devin, you're all over it today, man. 1.6 kilometers to a mile. I like it. 1 foot is 12 inches. That might be familiar to you. But how about a yard being 3 feet? Is that familiar? Maybe, maybe not. The one that I never remember is a mile is 1,760 yards. And a 1 mile is 5,280 feet. Now, Mr. Ross is sitting next to me here, and he's a little bit, how do I say this nicely, older than me, and I'd guarantee you he would know those numbers, but because I grew up in kind of metric time, those aren't familiar to me. Inches. What about inches? When we break down inches, it's really weird. You either break your inches down into a half an inch or a quarter of an inch or 1/16 or an eighth of an inch. So we always deal with fractions for anything smaller than an inch, which is something that kind of frightens me. How do you use measurements with those numbers? I don't know how they did it. It's just the strangest thing, isn't it? So when we're dealing with things that are smaller than an inch, in metric we have millimeters, and it's all based on 10. So we have 10 millimeters as a centimeter. It all just is wonderful. But if you're dealing with things that are smaller than an inch, you maybe have like 1 9/16 of an inch. That would be a common measurement. I just recently was working in my garage with an older gentleman, and we were measuring out plywood and cutting it, and 2x4s were framing, and we had to measure things, and I was measuring in metric, and he'd be like, okay, what's the measurement for that? And I'd be like, 112 centimeters. And he'd be like, okay, what was the measurement in inches? And then I'd have to remeasure it and count the little ticks on the little tape measure, and it's really confusing for me because metric just seems so much more straightforward. What is the relationship between unit up here? There's no relationship between just inch because there's nothing smaller than an inch. So we'll just leave that blank. I just want to do a few of these conversions. If you kind of get the hang of the conversions I do, we have a couple of minutes left before 11, you could probably get a lot of the work done in terms of the worksheet. It's all based on these conversions. So I'm going to show this dimensional analysis way to convert things, and maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. I can tell you this though, the way that I'm going to do these problems is very, very helpful for things that we're going to do in science, especially once we get into the physics unit. If you move on to chemistry next year, there's a whole process in chemistry called stoichiometry. And stoichiometry is using all of these units to cancel out units and things like that. So this process that I'm doing now is something you're going to see a lot of if you sort of continue on into the sciences at all. You'll definitely see it in physics. You'll definitely see it in chemistry. You'll also use it a lot in math. Not so much biology, but there you go. So the first one here is we're going to convert 5 yards to feet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with 5 yards. Then I'm going to write a little multiplication sign. And what I'm going to do is leave a fraction here. Now I need to remember the relationship between yards and feet. Now from the table up above, I know that I have 1 yard is 3 feet. So when I have yards here, if you think about when we cancel units or cancel numbers, if I have it on the top, because this is the same thing as writing 5 yards over 1, but I don't have to write in the 1, I'm going to put yards on the bottom over here. And the reason I'm going to do that is because they're going to cancel. And this might seem a bit strange. And I want to end up with units of feet because it's telling me to convert to feet. So I'm going to put feet on the top. Now I need to think about what the relationship is between yards and feet. Now from the table up above it says 1 yard is 3 feet. Now I'm just going to explain this one a little bit further because it's the first time we've done this. If I have 3 feet divided by a yard, if you want to think about that in terms of metric, which is something you're probably a little bit more familiar with, I have a meter stick here. Actually has yards on the back. No, it's all meters. Oh yeah, I have inches here. But if I said to you 1 meter is 100 centimeters and you're thinking, okay, if I have 1 meter, which is this length, and then I have 100 centimeters, which is the same length. If I divided 1 meter by 100 centimeters, they're both the same thing. So if I have the same thing, it's just 1. I have 1. If I have 100 centimeters, the length of the meter stick, that's 1 meter. So the same thing goes with 3 feet to 1 yard. It's just 1. So in this red circle I have here, the 3 feet over 1 yard, it's just going to be 1. So that's why I can do it this way, because I'm not multiplying by 5 and dividing by 1. The 3 feet over 1 yard is just 1. So really all I'm doing is multiplying by 1. So hopefully that kind of makes a little bit of sense to you. So I'm going to do the math here. I have my yards on the top, 5 yards times 3. So I kind of ignore the letters, the units, and just think about the numbers for a second. If you have 5 divided by 1 is 5, and then you're multiplying it by 3, so you're going to get 15. And then dividing that by the 1 yard on the bottom, and just dividing by 1 is going to give me 15. Now I need to think of kind of units. Where did my units go? What's going on with them? So the reason I put yards on the top and bottom was so they would cancel out. And what am I left with? Well, I have no other units at all except this feet, so my answer is going to be in feet. Now you could probably do that in your head. It just makes sense. If you have 5 yards, that's 15 feet, 3 feet to a yard. But it's important to kind of show these steps and be confident with how this is going to work. I'm just going to do these last 3 a little bit quicker, and then I'll leave you guys for today. And then maybe for next day, if you could print off this sheet, there's a few more problems down below. There's some definitions and a couple problems here, 2 more pages that I'd really like to do. So if you could print that off for next day, that would be awesome. So we're going to convert that same 5 yards to inches. So I'm going to start with 5 yards again. Do this one a little bit faster. Now, if I look in the table up above, I can see that 1 yard, you guys don't have this, so I'm going to just scroll up. 1 yard is 36 inches. So I'm going to go back down here. If I have yards on the top, I want to get rid of it. I'm going to put it on the bottom. So 1 yard is 36 inches. And again, 36 inches, 1 yard is the same thing. So all I'm really doing is multiplying by 1. Now, I can do the math here. 5 times 36. I've already done this. If you had a calculator, you would probably tell me that that was 180. And then I need to think about my units, because that's the whole point of doing all this. Yards on the top and bottom are canceling, and I'm left with inches. So I'm going to go ahead and throw in my units of inches. And that's going to be my answer there, 180 inches, 15 feet for the last one. I'll do these next two, and then that'll give you a good jump on some of this stuff. 51 inches into feet and inches. What does this mean? Well, remember this imperial. The imperial is a little bit different than metric. I'm just going to scroll up for Isabel here for a second. So we have 51 inches. We need to convert it to feet and inches. So what does that mean? Well, how many feet? If I asked you how tall you were, you wouldn't say I'm 51 inches tall. You'd say, you know, I'm 5 feet 6 inches tall or 5 feet 2 inches tall. It's just kind of how the imperial works. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure it out. And this is just kind of like converting these fractions from mixed fractions to whole fractions and back and forth. You guys have done this all before. I'm going to start with 51 inches. And then I'm going to remember that 1 foot is 12 inches. So how many times does 12 go into 51 without leaving anything over? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to end up with, I could even do this. I could go 51 divided by 12. What do I end up with? Well, I end up with 4 and a bit. In this case, 51 times, 12 times 4 is 48. So what do I have left over? 48, I have 3 left over. And then it's 3 over 12. So if I said I'm 51 inches tall, that would be the same thing as saying I'm 4'3", or 4 feet and 3 inches. Do the last one here, and then I'll let you guys go for the day. Yards, feet, and inches. So this one's a little bit trickier. So we have 51 inches again, and we need to think about yards. So I already know that 51 inches is 4 feet and 3 inches. And Devin put in 4.25, which is really good. And then 3 over 12 is the same thing as a quarter, so that would be correct, but this is just kind of how we write it. So 51 inches is 4 feet, 3 inches. And then I think about it, and I'm like, okay, I know there are, I'll do it in a different color so you don't think I'm doing the same calculation. I know that there are 3 feet in 1 yard. So if I have 4 feet, 3 goes into 4 once. So I know I'm going to have 1 yard. What's left over? If I had 4 feet and I know that I've taken 3 away to make that yard, I'm going to be left with 1 foot. And then I still have these 3 inches left over. So that's kind of how we would normally write these things in imperial. And Devin, you were all over it. So that's kind of what I want to leave with you guys today. This stuff up here, the imperial unit stuff that we did here, this is kind of what a lot of the questions on the practice are like. So if you can find some time either today, tomorrow, or this weekend to go through and look at the lesson number 1 practice and maybe get a little bit of that done. That would be amazing. Definitely print off lesson 1 worksheet because we're going to finish that off on Monday. And if you can get some of the practice done, that would mean you're ahead of the game. Again, this lesson 1 here is the same stuff I'm going through, just a different questions essentially. So you could look at that if you wanted to get ahead. And then this unit 2 quiz is based on a lot of the stuff from up above. So we'll probably take a couple days and then we'll get to that quiz. Is this for homework? It's an excellent question. If you have time, you want to get ahead, you can do it for homework, but I'm not going to insist. I'm really thinking that next week we're going to get started with the math and we'll get cruising because we have math every day next week. So I hope to get a lot done next week. So if you want to get a bit ahead so you have less stuff to do next week, that's fine. If you're a bit of a procrastinator like myself, you want to just kind of leave it, maybe get some of that stuff printed like a formula sheet, the worksheet, the unit guide. You want to print all that stuff off or send me a message in Moodle and I can bring it for you tomorrow. That would be good as well. So that's where I'm going to leave you today. If anybody has any questions, they can throw them in the chat now or send me a message in Moodle. I'm going to go back to my office and I'll be there for a while. Unit 2 learning guide is definitely something we won't finish for probably 2 weeks. So no, you don't have to do that. And Isabel just saying she missed her first math class. Is there anything I need to complete? Isabel, if you've logged into the course, the first thing we did was the introductory unit. So I'd like you to watch the video there and then do the algebra review, the bedmass review, and the fractions review and see if you can get that submitted. So I'm going to sign off now. Thanks very much. I'll be in Blackboard for probably about half an hour or so. If you have any questions, let me know. If you want me to print stuff off, if you need a calculator, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. And hopefully I can see all of you guys tomorrow at Wild Play. I'm very excited. So we'll see you there. Thanks guys. Have a good one and we'll talk to you soon.